what's up, everybody? Good to see everybody in the chat. I'm having a bit of a camera issue in the sense that the camera I normally use to do this is sitting behind me there because I failed to switch out the battery after filming last night at the studio. So my battery is completely dead on that one. So hopefully this one is fine. Let me know how the audio levels are, guys, and if you can hear me. And if there's any issues, because this is not as smoothly, or not running as smoothly as I was hoping. I think this is just sort of a normal theme when you're trying to do like too many things at once. Eventually it'll all be in the studio space anyways, but these Saturday live streams are a little bit more casual, a little bit more fun to do, because they're less constructed. How's it going, everybody? How's it going, Marius? Good to see you. Metal 571's in the chat. Nice to see you. some fun comments there already. Happy with your second-hand HE500. Awesome. That head appliance is fugly. Yeah, this is the Gold Planar GL 1200 that a lot of people have been hyping up. But yeah. I guess I should do like some sort of impressions on it, because I've been spending a lot of time testing it in the last little bit. So far, this is definitely a no for me, not because of the tuning. The tuning here, okay, the tuning is not good, but it is a lot less offensive than the GL 2000. So hey, Sleepy, what's up, man? I saw your Discord comment, but I didn't have a chance to reply because I had to go live. I was late, so thank you very much, man. Thanks for the $10. Very kind of you. And yes, I have listened to a bunch of good music lately, but a lot of it's just been my test tracks. I've been trying to kind of get away from Tidal because I'm having issues with Tidal right now where, I mean, obviously that MQA thing that Golden Ears produced was awesome, and I encourage everybody to watch that video if you haven't already. But basically, he debunked the whole MQA thing. And so for that reason, I'm trying to kind of get away from Tidal. The problem is all of my test tracks are in Tidal right now, so I need to figure out an alternative solution. And unfortunately, Qobuz isn't available in Canada. But that's not the thing. The main issue that I have is with Tidal right now is that for whatever reason, there's like really bad buffering, and it just sort of happened like out of the blue. I want to say like a month ago, and it just now every time I want to skip to a certain part of a track, it doesn't do it. It takes forever, which is a bit of an issue. So not totally sure what's going on there, but would love to get away from Tidal. So hopefully the Spotify hi-fi high-res Spotify stuff ends up actually being good, which yeah, it's hard to know. But yeah, how's everybody doing this Saturday? Soundwave, good to see you. Yeah. Qobuz also does have an inferior library, but I would still be fine with it, as long as I can get my test tracks in there, right? GL 2000 is Z's favorite. I don't know what he said about this one. I imagine it would also be hyped up. This does interesting things. The staging here and the sense of space and separation is very interesting. I say interesting, not universally good, but certain things about it are definitely good. Like left and right definition is very interesting. Center image is a bit intimate, but the rest of the space and stage is very involved in a really cool way. So I like that about it. It feels like there's a extra sort of sense of 3D-ness to the whole thing. Now, I'm not going to say holographic. Well, I guess I just did, but no, not like that. But yeah, it's an interesting and involved stage. The detail is the main reason that I'm not. This is going to be a no for me, mainly because the detail I think is just not competitive. For the inconvenience of having to use the speaker amp, and then this it comes with a little sort of like transformer box thing that you got to use with the speaker amp. Just for reference, I'm using this with the SPL S800, which is way more than enough power. So actually, I have to run it pretty low. But Walco, thank you. Thanks from France for your works. You're welcome. Thanks very much for the donation there. Yeah, the detail here, it's like it's not like in the sense of space that's the problem. In the sense of separation, that's the problem. The separation's solid on this. It's the sense of it's very dynamically limp, like dynamically, and not just in terms of macrodynamics, but in terms of microdynamics as well. Now the mids do have a decent amount of detail, which unfortunately the tuning doesn't really help. But yeah, like I there's a sort of bluntedness. It's dynamically blunted in fairly significant ways. This is the 1200, not the 850. Not the 850, guys. GL 1200. So this is the ribbon driver one, not the planar magnetic ones. Well, I guess planar ribbon. It's a ribbon driver one. Similar. People are like comparing this to the RAL SR1A, and no, it is not close. Not even remotely close to the RAL SR1A. They're comparing it for good reason because they're similar. It's a similar technology, but for detail and microdynamics and micro detail, the RAL is in a completely different category. It smokes this. Where this has the advantage is that the bass level is way more consistent on this than it is on the RAL. But there's no universe where I'd take this over the RAL for technical performance. But that was really the main downside with the RAL, apart from some tuning quirks there. The main issue was that the bass rolled off, and there's nothing really that can fix that. I know people talk about you going up to different sources, and you can, and it will improve certain things, but there's still a limit to what's possible there. And with this one, it's the bass is pretty darn consistent. It extends all the way down to 30 hertz, 20 hertz, no problem, which is nice. But it's not worth it for the lack of detail. Compared to the HU1, oh god. No. I mean, I don't know. Like you guys are gonna have to make up your minds on that. I can't weigh in on people making crazy claims like that. Like, it sucks because like I wish that more people could hear this. There are some significant barriers to entry when using this. Not as much as with the RAL. I'll granted that, but there are. It's expensive for one. It's $1,300, $1,400. You have to use a speaker amp, and then you also have to use this use the little transformer thing, which they do include. So I think a lot of people aren't going to hear this, or at least the ones that are going to hear it are going to be persuaded by the good comments rather than the negative comments. There are good things about it, though. That's the thing. I think this is way less offensive than the GL2000. Partially for its tuning, yes, but also it doesn't have that kind of haziness in the mids. The mids, I'd say here, are actually decent. Just the there's an overall bluntedness to the microdynamic and macrodynamic quality that I don't think is it's just not competitive for technical performance. The subjective qualities of technical performance, I guess. I'll show you guys the measurements here, but keep in mind, like, I have to do more measurements because they come with 2 sets of pads, and this is just the one set, the default set that's on here. And so I need to do more measuring, and also, like, I've only done like one channel, and I need to do both channels to confirm that there's not a channel imbalance issue or anything like that. I don't hear it like that. I don't think there's any issues there. But yeah, and also I want to double check. This one doesn't seem to change very much depending on coupling positioning or anything like that, and there's no weird air gap behavior like there was with that question that people were having with ASR stuff. So that's not an issue with this one. It's more I want to double check that there's certain features in the treble that I want to make sure are not artifacts because they're very weird. So I'll show you guys that right now. So this is the tuning and frequency response of the GL1200 ribbon thing. I don't know what to call it. Ribbon planar is technically not, I mean, it's true, but it's like a ribbon driver. Um, and So so basically your tuning here is like an old school Odyssey, where it has no ear gain going on until you get to like 6K. So pretty strong pronouncement of 6K. And technically the GL 2000 kind of measured like this, but it was more a 5K peak and then nothing for mid treble and then and then tons of upper treble. So it feels like they just threw, like they had a decent transducer in there, and they didn't really have much consideration there for the tuning. And because that was immediately wrong sounding. With this one, you have some mid treble. You don't have the lower treble, and the nice thing about this is that there's not as offensive a harmonic imbalance there between for the lower treble. So your mid treble is where you're getting most of that, and then there is the upper treble does come back. What I'm kind of not sure about is like this stuff here. Like I don't know, subjectively it doesn't sound like this is as massive of a dip, because and this is also where the contra interaction is. So certain parts of the physical ear are going to be blocking this, or impeding this here, and that's why generally there's it shows a dip there. I think one of the reasons why it looks like this is because the cups are pretty huge, and so it might be taking into consideration certain things that normal headphones don't, with the way that the coupling is. So I want to double check that, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty recessed here in the in this part of the treble, but I don't know if it's this recessed. But yeah, the main issue is, of course, that it's missing the ear gain. That's plain and simple. It's missing most of the ear gain. So it sounds pretty muffled and muted, which is kind of a shame, because kind of like in this whole region is where I hear the best detail coming through. And so I've started playing around with EQ, but the one thing about this that I think makes me hesitant about even bothering to EQ this is because the distortion characteristics of this are pretty awful. Now I'm told that this is normal. Like that this I was talking to Matt about this, and he was saying that this is kind of expected behavior for this type of driver, in the bass at least. And so you got second harmonic as the red line, and that it's weird that fifth and third are elevated over this. You get this kind of behavior in balanced armature drivers as well, in IEMs. Just interesting, like different, like the order of harmonics is a bit different. So it's kind of curious. Keeping in mind, of course, that THD plus N is not an indicator of detail or lack thereof. It's just an interesting characteristic. But this would be above the audible threshold. Like this is not, here I'll show you, this is 85 dB, so the 90 dB one is even higher. Most people listen around 85. I think 85 is fairly, it's like the solid level. And this is just like definitely audible. Pretty crazy. Not as worried about this, but this is what makes me kind of worried about, like if I EQ this region here, looking again at the frequency response, I don't want to introduce, like I worry that if I recommend people to EQ it, that might be an issue. Hey, Trellis, thank you. Let me just hold on, let's switch this. There we go. I'm back. Okay. Trellis, thank you very much for the $10, man. What did you think of Amir/ASR's measurement of the Ananda? That was a fun drama-filled thread. I guess I could give the TLDW. By the way, let me know if there's like some delay going on with the audio. But yeah, the bottom line with the ASR Ananda, I don't know, fiasco is that he measured one without a proper seal, and whether that was due to the unit itself being an older unit or having wear on the pads or something, I'm not sure, or just the fact that he measured it on a 45 CA, which according to Oratory has difficulty getting a seal, or not, it's not difficult, is the wrong word, it's harder to get a seal on that than it is on the 43 AG. And but his comments on that are that you actually can get a seal on the on the 45CA. And for anybody who's wondering, the 45CA and 43AG are compatible rigs. They're comparable rigs. It's just in the 45CA you get two of them, and they're spaced out in a way that makes it so you don't have to come up with some DIY solution for ensuring clamp force is accurate. Now my suspicion there, and I've seen this with Sean Hollow's measurements as well, is that it's difficult to ensure that the seal is representative without additional testing, with in-ear microphones for making sure the coupling integrity is intact. And I think that's why you see his measurements of the Sundara are like this as well, right? Like, I've proved that the Sundara has totally fine bass response with multiple versions now of the Sundara. So when they keep showing it without having a good seating, especially if you're just showing one seating, that's, I guess, the main issue. If you're just showing one seating, you're not really showing what would be representative for people. But okay, so his comments there on the Ananda, his being Amir's, essentially, a lot of the contentiousness there is derived from not getting a proper seal on the 45CA. Now, in my measurements, I showed that there's a huge caveat to this, and I'm sure I'm going to get comments in later on about this. But if you do on head in ear microphone measurements to test bass level and coupling integrity, the caveat there is that you are just one person, and that might not be representative across a wider panel of people, wider range of heads. But because ear and cheek simulators like the 45CA and the 43AG are not actual human heads, the on-head measurement is actually representative of an actual human, how it would measure on an actual human. And so what I'm not, there's a red herring here. I'm not suggesting that my on-head in-ear on-head in-ear measurement for bass response is more representative for an average population than what you might get with a 43AG or 45CA. Merely that it is possible to get the on-head measurement in the bass to agree with both the 45CA and the 43AG. And so to me, it's not so much that I want him to only show the proper coupling integrity, like with full bass extension with the seal and instead of the air gap behavior. It's that if you can get that kind of behavior, if you can get a proper seal, you have to show it. You should show it. And so I'm not sure how far you got into that thread, but I showed that you can get a proper seal with the Ananda, and that it is representative. It matches, it agrees with the on-head measurement in the bass. So sorry, both Ananda. I used the Ananda BT there, which is not as good sounding headphone, and then also the Aria, which has a similar kind of design. So if you can show it, you should show it. That's really where my point was with that. Like, when he's showing the air gap behavior, that is an interesting metric, but that's not more representative than for people who are going to get it, a seal. It's just showing, it's basically laziness. That's the only way I can describe it. You're showing one seating where you're not getting a proper seal, even though you can get a proper seal. So I think that's just not being diligent enough as far as the measurement is concerned. Now, interestingly, his subjective take there agrees with, at least in his mind, it agrees with his measurement of that, of the Ananda there with the air gap behavior and the bass roll-off. Now, the thing is, the Ananda has notoriously poor macrodynamics, so there's not much sense of punch and slam there, regardless of whether or not you get a good seal. Here's what I would be. I think he's using that lack of bass extension to explain why subjectively it doesn't sound very punchy. And I think that's wrong. I think if he were to use in-ear microphones to test coupling integrity, he would find that it does match, and that that it does match what you'd get with the seal, and it still would sound fairly dead. And fairly dead Yeah, I mean, it's detailed, but it's not, it lacks the punch there. So I think there's something else that's responsible for this, because both the Ananda and the Aria are counterexamples to measured bass response being responsible for the sense of macrodynamics. They have very low resonance frequencies, and you can see this with air gap behavior, and they both don't have much going on for punch and slam. So, even if you boost the bass on them, they still don't really have much of that. Now, you can fake it in a way. The Aeon 2 Noir does this in a sense as well. So I do think it's something that could potentially be captured or shown by frequency response, but at the moment it's not conclusive enough to say that measured bass response is correlated directly with the sense of punch and slam. It's just not, because there are way too many counterexamples. Now, as far as the rest of the review is concerned, it seemed like a lot of his evaluation was the usual sort of indexing super hard for measured results, regardless of what the actual listening experience would be like for people. And you could see that his criticisms were about distortion levels and driver behavior, which technically are good criticisms. The only caveat there is that nobody's going to be listening at that volume. That's insane. No, like, trying to say that people are going to listen at 114 dB is damaging. That's dangerous. Don't do that. So I think it's kind of a moot point to say that the distortion characteristics are bad in this circumstance. Okay, nobody's ever going to be, at least ideally, right? I would hope that people aren't going to be listening at that level. So I think here's like the overall, I guess, Cole's notes of my take on ASR's stuff with headphones. I think he's new to measuring headphones, and I think that it just like there was a learning curve for me when I first started doing this, even just with less accurate rigs like the Mini DSP or stuff before we got the Gross. There's a learning curve with this stuff, and properly showing measurements and figuring out what the best way to represent this stuff is. I think he needs to go through that process, and then eventually he'll get to the point where maybe he will agree. I'd have some concerns about, like, he seems to suggest that people are wrong if they have a different methodology, or if their methodology disagrees with his. And to a certain extent, I understand that if you think you're doing it right, then you're going to think everybody else is wrong. But at the moment, everybody else who's doing measurements is basically saying the same thing that I'm saying here. They're basically saying, you got to show multiple seatings for starters. You got to show, and not like forward, backward, up, down, like not that stuff, like just multiple accurate seatings. And if you can show a proper seal, you should. Like, if it shows up, if it's possible to do that on a rig, then do your diligence and show it that way. And, maybe show it in addition, maybe show the air gap behavior as well, right? It's great to show the air gap behavior because that's a relevant point. It's just that that's not necessarily representative. But yeah, that's the Cole's notes of that. Jason, thank you very much. Oh, and by the way, with the ASR stuff, like, pay attention to the stuff that gets recommended, and there seems to be a bit of a narrative there that's not all that scientific, and I think it's probably worth if I were to poke holes, it would be there. At some point, it might be nice to have him on the live stream and have a chat about this stuff, because I'm curious what the defensible position of this is, because I think it's always best to sort of steel man stuff. So if you're going to be, I guess, having a debate about something, it's best to find the knockdown answer against the strongest version of an argument rather than the weakest one. So I'd want to get some clarity from his perspective on why he thinks it's a good idea to represent the stuff the way that he's doing. Because so far, the only real counter argument that I've seen, which is a good one, is that one on-head measurement is only representative of one person. But that also kind of is a red herring. That misses the point a little bit about what we're trying to do with that, because I'm not showing the on-head measurement as a representative result for everybody, just using it to see if it's possible to get that same behavior on the rig, which would then be at least representative of an actual human, not the average actual human, not every human, just an actual human. And so if the rig can show it, then I think you should do that at the very least. So anyway, sorry, Jason, thank you. um, what's the slam difference between the Focal Clear, which I currently own, and a headphone like the Fostex TR-X00 or the Emu Teak? So honestly, I think that the Clear slams harder. I know people like those biodynamics, the biocellulose drivers from Fostex, but for me, I think the Focal, hybrid independent surround stuff, I think it punches harder. The difference might be that the bass level is not the same. So yeah, I don't. If you're looking for punch and slam and you have a Clear, I don't think going to a TR-X00. I haven't heard the Teak, so I can't help you there. But yeah, I don't think it's really going to be that worth it. Ramdas, thank you. Focal Celesty or Lcdx outside of the dynamic planar debate. Well, that's really what it is. It's the dynamic versus planar debate. Do you want a planar presentation or dynamic driver presentation? I will say that the technicalities of the Lcdx absolutely smoke that of the Celesty. Not for microdynamics or micro detail, but like the sense of separation, and space is also the wrong word, but like the Lcdx is not as intimate either. So yeah, and of course the weight issue with the Lcdx, it's a heavy boy. Phil, thank you. Hello, sweet Andrew. Oh my god, what is the significance of using exclusive mode in Tidal, Qobuz, etc.? It disables equalizer APO if I turn it on. I wouldn't use it, to be honest. The only place that I would use it is in Rune. Tidal, again, I think people should move away from Tidal ideally after, just on a principle. But yeah, I would not use exclusive mode in Tidal. There's too many question marks there. I don't think there's a point to doing that. Qobuz, I can't help you because I no longer have a Qobuz subscription because Canada. Marius, thank you. Losing 25 pounds? No. I just felt like it was time to. I felt like it was time to lose the COVID-20. I was going a little bit in the wrong direction there. Now you, Metal says, now you understand why I quit and don't really have any desire to go get back into reviewing. I didn't. How did we all get this from enjoying music? Yeah. But that's the thing, right? Like, Amir's a smart guy, right? I think his approach is wrong. I think what they're doing with the narrative there is wrong. But that doesn't mean that it's not defensible. And so I've yet to see a defense of that. But if you just take a step back, like I know there's a lot of people who will go there and trust the opinions there because there's science in the name and they think science is good, right? It's a little bit like using quantum healing, terms like that, where it's like, you put the term quantum in there and suddenly people think it means there's more to it than there actually is, because there are enough counterexamples there where subjectively, it might get really recommended, but subjectively it doesn't sound good. The topping A90 is another great example of that. So caveating that, of course, with recognizing that more data is still good. I think the overall outlook there is the wrong one. Even though I also do measurements, I use measurements, I EQ stuff. So a lot of the tangibles in practice are the same between us. As far as like what we do to get stuff to sound good and what we look for in terms of tuning and stuff like that. But I think the place where it starts is wrong-headed in my mind. I think we should use this stuff to guide us, not tell us yes or no. And by all accounts, there's absolute merit in doing those just measurement tests and then looking at those measurements and seeing and investigating it and figuring out like, what does this stuff mean for the subjective experience? And but that nobody's doing that. Like that's the problem. They're just looking at it as a indicator of good or bad, and making recommendations based on that stuff. No. Now, with that said, looking at a frequency response graph, at the very least, you'll be able to tell, if you don't like it, right? If something looks, well, let me just pull up. If something looks like this will tell you it's going to sound pretty muted and muffled there in the upper mids, right? And then there's the treble is going to be a bit soft there as well. So, it'll tell you those types of things. But beyond that, it's not really a indicator. Joel, thank you. I'm looking for a suitable, super analytical and detailed mid-priced DAC amp or DAC amp combo for Focal Clear MG. Torn between SMSL SH9 topping A90. Don't get the A90. A30 Pro, DX7 Pro, D30. Okay. For an amp, you're going to want to get the Rebel amp. It's a bit big, but it smokes all of those. And for a DAC, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. LAQXD1, although it's balanced and it's a single-ended amplifier, but LAQXD1's fine. If you want to actually spend a bunch of money on source gear, save up and buy a tube amplifier. Be my recommendation. For DACs that I like personally, SMSL SU9, that's got a lot of features and functionality there. Sounds great too. And LAQXD1. But really, the Focal Clear and Clear MG do not need power. You can run it. It's a 55 ohm headphone. You can run it off of just about anything. The main thing is you want to have that be kind of separate from, like, you don't want to be running it off of like a laptop output. If you have it off of a nicer setup, like as a discrete setup, it's generally going to be cleaner sounding. But it's even then, like, a lot of the laptops are getting good these days, and phones are getting better these days. So you don't need that much. So I'm not saying there's no difference. I'm saying the difference isn't the same as if you need to give it a lot of power, like a 300 ohm headphone or 400 ohm headphone or something like that. Chad, thank you. Anyone else snatched the Alegia of Adorama for $3.99? Zeus posted a link a day or two ago. So I don't share his opinion of the Alegia. I think it's not as well tuned. In fact, I just don't share his opinion about most things. Some things we do agree on, but the Alegia I think sounds great with a bit of EQ, and for that price, I think it's kind of a no-brainer. DMS's video comparing the Alegia and the Celestia, I think was a very interesting one. That one I think is a more sober take, because he explains, I think appropriately, that the Celestia is the one that is like much more normally tuned, like it's a more neutral kind of tuning, and the Alegia is a flavor oriented tuning that's a bit weird, but at the same time the weirdness kind of enhances certain other aspects like spatial qualities, and I kind of agree there. Like I think this is a fairly solid interpretation. Now, I do think that the Celestia is more detailed than the Alegia. It just sounds like straight up more detailed, but part of that is because it's a more intimate presentation too. But at $3.99, yeah, I think that's solid. What I would do is I would go with $3.99. I'd buy that and then see if I could find the Celestia pads, because it doesn't totally make it sound the same as the Celestia, but it does improve the frequency response overall. I'm just double checking that, make sure I didn't miss anything here, guys. So I'm a bit behind. I was intending to talk more about this and less about the ASR drop. But actually, it's nice to see that folks in various different communities are not taking that stuff as seriously anymore, and they're recognizing that it's a bit of like you call it science, and then people think, oh yeah, it must be science, it must be scientific. But the actual scientific approach would be a lot closer to what Sean Olive is doing, or has done, where he runs panels and gets these subjective, impressions from people. That's actually something people don't understand it's not as commonly reported with the Harman research. If you look at the research, apart from the tuning curve that they ended up with, he actually did record the subjective results. So, like, people would say, this sounds neutral, this sounds muffled, this sounds bright, that kind of stuff. And so it's pretty cool that he included that. I think what we should do though is something like that for these other qualities, like, you know, detail or soundstage or dynamics, right? Whatever is sort of agreed upon. Use whatever terms you want, but there seems to be subjective agreement that the HD800S has a really broad and spacious soundstage. For example, there's quite a bit of agreement that the Focal headphones have really good punch and impact. There's quite a bit of agreement that, you know, a lot of the DCA headphones don't have much going on for punch, right? So the question in my mind would be, you know, how do we what do we anchor that to in the data? You know, say we get a lot of agreement here, and we look at, you know, what are some interesting measured phenomenon here, or measured results here, and you know, is there a way that we could predict what this would be like just by looking at the data? Because right now there are so many counterexamples to these questions. I can't look at a frequency response and tell you whether or not something's going to have a good soundstage, except in cases where the frequency response is like faking it, right? But there's examples way beyond that where the frequency response is totally fine, and you see a pretty big variation in terms of perceived sense of space and stage. So, you know, that to me is like, it's not good enough to just show a frequency response graph and say, you know, here's the soundstage. There's more to it than that. And same with detail, microdynamics, the same with instrument separation, all these qualities. So I think the actual scientific approach would be to use this stuff as a hypothesis. Use it as a hypothesis, and then test that, and see if you see what falls out of this, and correlate it with measured stuff. Because, I mean, as any good externalist will tell you, features of your experience depend upon, you know, facts external to them. And in my mind, if it's something that is perceived, like actually tangibly audible, then it is also measurable. And even if stuff that isn't, obviously is measurable, but, you know, that's the more interesting stuff. Someone asks, a lot of you guys are asking what do I think of the A90 and why I think it's bad. Okay. If you compare a topping A90 to a similarly priced Rebel Amp or IHA6, it is hilarious how mushy and dead and limp the A90 sounds by comparison. And I think a lot of people, they bought the A90 because they saw that it won or was, you know, doing well in whatever graph ASR was posting. And that stuff really is just an indicator of whether or not something is broken. So, you know, it's tough really to get consensus on that, because for most people, they don't have another amp to compare that to. But yeah, the A90 is a particularly dead sounding amplifier. So no, I don't recommend it. And it's like enough of a difference where, like, yeah, it'd be pretty easy to get that in the blind test and get it right in the blind test. Trellis, thank you. This is an apology monies for bringing up ASR trauma. No, I don't mind. It's yeah, it's not a big deal. But thank you. Kryn says graph bad. No, see, this is the thing. Obviously I use graphs, right? Obviously, like, there is at the very least something you can anchor to the experience, and it's the perception of tonal balance. 100% you can anchor that. You know, the graphs are indicative of that. They're predictive of sound quality in terms of tonal balance. 100%. But I don't think we can be, like, if we're just indexing for tonal balance, we're missing so many other qualities of the experience that are important to also consider. And by the way, there's a lot of stuff. I saw Amir's video on the Ananda at one point. Or I think he posted fairly recently in the thread, and I saw that he was talking about the psychoacoustic effect of having large speaker-like transducers next to your ears. There is something to that. The psychoacoustic effects are real, but at the same time, there's enough of a difference between headphones of a similar type that it's not just psychoacoustic in that sense. But I do think for a lot of people, you know, factors like price, you know, the physical size and weight of a thing, you know, that all has or maybe something about the aesthetics, that all has a psychoacoustic influence. And yeah, he's absolutely right that can make it so that people pay attention in ways that they didn't when they're told something is cheap and, you know, average sounding. So yeah, a lot of it. This is people are really good like at picking up, like human beings are really good at picking up very fine little details and little things. Not everybody is super discerning, but like people have the potential to be extremely discerning. And I mean, in that sense, I almost feel like what we're analyzing our measurements in terms of doesn't really do it justice. Doesn't do our human perceptive faculties justice. It's a very good start though. Like, don't get me wrong, it's an important start. But yeah, and all of that has the potential to be skewed by psychoacoustics as well. So that was kind of the main point there. Soundwave, thank you. So what would be an alternative to the A90 with similar power and balanced out? See, that's a challenge because I'm not sure about balanced. See, the thing is, I don't know. Balanced is something I used to care about before I had experience with a wider range of equipment. And then I realized that, just because something is single-ended, that doesn't mean that it's inherently worse than something that's balanced. The only thing with balance is if you do have an amplifier that has an actual balanced output there, that's probably best to use that output because that's what the amplifier was designed around. And the single-ended outputs are often just sort of tacked on. I would easily recommend the IHA6 over the A90. But the problem with the IHA6 is that it's not very good for more sensitive headphones. It's really made for inefficient planars that require high current. That's the whole point of that amplifier. So, and in that sense, if you're going to be running it balanced, I mean, I don't really see a point to balanced beyond the power benefits for certain planar magnetic headphones. I don't like not the balanced outputs if they are better than single-ended outputs, because that's definitely possible. It's more that going with a balanced design over a single-ended design, if you don't need the power benefits there, I don't see a reason to care about that. In so many ways, I'd rather have a high-end tube amplifier, like an Amson Sound Kenzie or something like that, which is single-ended, and for a dynamic driver headphone. I think that's, to me at least, that's the way I like to listen to dynamic driver headphones. So if you're asking me what's a good balanced amplifier that's better than the A90, IHA6 every day, easily. It might not measure as well, but it definitely sounds better. Like, no question. Rob, thank you. Rob, you got to ask your questions in the YouTube chat. I think you emailed me a question, and I think I replied. Let me know if that was you. But you got to actually ask it in the super chat so I can answer it right away. I haven't had a chance to listen to the Hollow Audio May. Oh, by the way, actually, I see somebody asking about the HE6SE V2. I do have that at the post office, so I got to pick that up today. I'm expecting it to be better for its default frequency response than the version 1 there. What? Got to be the GL1200. Yeah, so this is the GL1200, Gold Planar GL1200 ribbon headphone, which I got a hard time recommending it over. I should stress I haven't measured it with the other pads yet, so I need to still do more testing on that. I've really just done very basic measurements just with these pads, so I just have a frequency response so far. But subjectively, there's a dynamic, macro and micro dynamic bluntedness to this, where the detail just isn't quite there for bass and treble. The mid detail is totally solid. So actually, the nice thing about this is that it doesn't have that sort of hazy mids the way that even though it's super muffled sounding because of the frequency response, but the way the Gold Planar GL2000's mids were pretty hazy, this doesn't have that problem as much. Dynamics or voodoo. Yeah, some people also just don't care about dynamics, and for the longest time I was like that until I heard the absence of it in a DCA headphone. I went, oh yeah, okay, I know what you're talking about. And comparing DCA headphones to focal headphones, that that's when you notice it, and then you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I get what you're talking about now, because it's not bass level, right? Actually, the HE6 is a great example. It's got a downward sloping bass response with a shockingly low resonance. Apparently, the driver is also somewhat damped, for the shape of where the air gap is, but like you can have an air gap there and the bass does not change, which is amazing. It's only when you like physically lift it off the rig that you actually get the air gap resonance with those. But the overall bass level there is lower than what you get with the Ananda. Now, tell me, is that going to have, better or worse dynamics? Well, it turns out that has way better dynamics, but from a measurement perspective, that wouldn't tell you that at all. When is the Lcdx review coming? Probably before the end of the month. It's I just have to do some more editing there, on that one. Also, with the Lcdx and XC, something that's missed is I've had to do a lot of testing with that one to measure different things like air gap behavior and whatnot. I think the big question in my mind would be, with both of them, would be, because they took out two magnets, and they redesigned the magnetic circuit by kind of spacing the magnets out a little bit differently. Does the technical performance for detail and stuff like that still hold up? Now, my subjective take here so far is that it does, but I don't have the old one to compare it to, right? So, but subjectively, like from memory, in my mind, it does. No experience with the Syncser stuff, sorry. Scientist, do you have the ability to say more than 30 different words? 30 brand name. I don't know I don't know what that means. Uh, HE6 SEV2 all day. It's phenomenal. Yeah. So like, I don't know if somebody can let me know if that deal is still going on right now, like the Adorama one. That it was like $700 or something like that. That's solid. If the tuning is actually good, right? So we'll see. Should have Metal on the stream. You guys are asking him questions. Marius practices voodoo. Or voodoo. Okay. I'm not all that aware with the difficulties of tuning more exotic drivers, but with planars slash dynamics, there are a multitude of options to alter frequency response in reliable ways. The Sindara and K371 are tuned extremely well, yet are also pretty cheap. As an example, I personally use DSP on every headphone I use, but at the same time, I'd rather the headphone were designed proficiently and not corrected to hell and back with passive DSP. Passive DSP? You mean like an analog filter? I'm not sure what you mean by passive DSP. Yeah, so I mean, you're absolutely right. Dynamic driver headphones, this is something I've learned. Dynamic driver headphones and planar magnetic headphones are tuned differently. Like the way that they achieve their tuning is in a different way, and it kind of makes sense. But a lot of it has to do with controlling resonances, and you have different types of resonances going on between those two technologies. But yeah, everything else that you said there, I agree with. With regards to the EQ comment, I would rather not have to EQ headphones, and I would like, in my mind, there isn't a headphone that can't be improved with EQ, but I think that headphones should at the very least be tuned reasonably well out of the box so that you don't have to do it, because there are a lot of use case situations where you either wouldn't be able to, or you just wouldn't have it's inconvenient to do so. So that's kind of my take on that. But again, with the Odyssey stuff, it's like you're kind of missing out if you're not EQing. Like if you want to get the most out of your headphones, then yeah, you get into EQ. I agree with Oratory on this subject though as well, where there are limits to certain headphones with with EQ. Are you shrinking, or are your headphones getting bigger and bigger and bigger? Bit of both. Yeah. No, these are particularly large. they're not heavy, and actually they're reasonably comfortable. Okay, they are heavy, but not like as heavy as they look. Um, like these are lighter than the Odysseys. The cable here, yeah, it's pretty good. I don't hate the cable. Is there going to be a video on the Hi-Fi Man closeback? No, no, not unless they send another one, because I sent it back because there's, like, I don't. If that one was not representative, I don't want to make a video on something that's not representative. So I actually reached out to those guys, and I mentioned, I said, you know, like, this is one of the weirdest tunings I've ever heard, and I don't think I can, like, is this representative? And they didn't know. So if we get another one in, then I will. But at the moment, those impressions on the forum are kind of where I've left it. It was supposed to be the start of a tour, and that's why I reached out to them as well. I was like, look, yeah, guys, like, do you want this to be the thing that's going to everybody else? And yeah, I think maybe they don't. It had really good detail though, like and like really crazy soundstage as well. It's just that the tuning was so bizarre. Like, and to the point where EQ couldn't fix it. I never talked about your average dynamic driver or planar magnetic headphone. Obviously, we can tune those now. I was talking about high-end headphones utilizing high-end technology, but dynamic driver and planars are high-end headphones. You can do Focal Utopia is a high-end headphone, and that's got a dynamic driver in it. There's okay. There was a wonderful post again by Oratory on Reddit where he went over different ways of doing dynamic driver headphones. I think there was a Varimotion design like Sennheiser does with their HD650s and stuff like that. There's a corrugated style where the outside of the driver has like the ring around it has kind of like it's a bunch of corrugation, so a bunch of like splits, and the point of that is to be able to have a more even bass response. And because it helps make that whole thing more, I guess, compliant for the movement that's required for that kind of bass response. And then the third style was that independent hybrid surround style that Focal uses on all their drivers actually. And so, you know, and there's a number of other ones that use that style as well. So, you know, there's lots of different ways of doing dynamic driver headphones, and everything from like the materials to the coatings to whatever else, right? And similarly, there's lots of different ways of doing planar magnetics as well. So ribbon, just because something is a ribbon driver or just because something is an electrostatic does not mean that it is inherently better than a dynamic driver or a planar. And similarly, just because something is a planar, that doesn't mean that it's inherently better than a dynamic driver headphone. Now, personally, I do think that in the best cases, what's been achieved so far with planar magnetic headphones has been more technically impressive than what's been achieved with dynamic driver headphones at the very high end, like the Hi-Fi Man Susvara or Odyssey LCD4. I do think those are more detailed than the Utopia. Top 10 electrostats while showering. Yes, top 10 electrostats while showering. There's that $50,000 Sennheiser one that's probably the best, and then the Hi-Fi Man Shangri-La, probably Shangri-La Junior as well. Stax Omega. HE1000 SE versus LCD4. HE1000 SE, at least the one that I heard, had a bizarre frequency response, as does the LCD4. So yeah, I mean, for detail, they're pretty close. I'd give the edge to the LCD4 there, with also better sense of dynamics. But both of them are headphones I wouldn't really recommend without EQ. Which I think it's like, that's the big thing with those high-end, crazy detailed planars. Only one of them has a good frequency response, and that's the Hi-Fi Man Susvara. All the others are weird in some way. Although I'd be curious about with the pad updates to the LCD4, so I need to reach out to Odyssey and see if they could send me one with the new pads, because that would be really interesting. If they're able to get the tuning there similar to what they got with the Lcdx and with the LCD2, then that's solid. Of course, the weight is still ridiculous, but yeah. And I'm including the Abyss stuff in that. Like, the Abyss stuff, if they could figure out the frequency response, if they could get that, nailed, then it would be those would be up there as well. Passive RC filters and the Odyssey stuff. Yeah, yeah. Now I don't know if they're still doing that. That's a really interesting question. I see Alan Rick in the chat. Good to see you. What about the RAL SR1A? I think you mean SR1A, or the headphone AMT. Yeah, it's another example. Both recent exotic headphones constructed using modern approaches and way better FR curves than stacks. That is interesting and true to an extent. I think the SR007 2.9 might have something to say there, and same with the Shangri-La Junior, but about the frequency response. But yeah, the SR1A, to give it credit here, is so detailed. It's up there with some of those crazy planars as well. But the tuning definitely, yeah, it rolls off in the bass pretty hard, and it's pretty forward there in the transition between the lower portion of the upper mids, like 2K ish. So it's got a little bit of honk there to it, but you can kind of change the tuning depending on the flaps, right? And you can move it forward and backward. To me, that's still there's too many barriers to entry with the SR1A that I wouldn't take it seriously personally, but I can totally see somebody loving that experience. I can definitely see somebody being into it. And it's leaps and bounds over better than this. Let's see. I gotta catch up here, guys, as is tradition. I don't. This is an interesting conversation back and forth you guys have going on here about different driver types and technology and stuff like that, and then frequency response. I don't consider roughly hitting a target curve to be good tuning. If it requires EQ to sound complete, it's not well tuned, although the headphone is admittedly nicely tuned. So, okay, let's think about this. This is the GL2000, GL1200. So, some similarity there with the GL2000 in terms of lacking ear gain, but just look at the dotted line here. That's the target, and that's a combination of 2013 in the bass and then 2018 in the mids and treble. And a lot of people, when they see an analysis that focuses on the tuning like this and looks at adherence to the target, they think that any deviation is going to be criticized, and I don't think that's a good way of looking at it. I think so. For example, this region from starting at about 100 hertz and then ending at around 500 hertz, there's a bit of a dip here in the upper bass, lower mids for the target. To me, I don't think it matters if a headphone matches this. It's interesting when it does, but I don't think it really matters. The main thing that these targets are super useful for is they show a known reference data point. So showing frequency response would be kind of pointless for the average person if they didn't have that reference point, that known data point. You could do it by showing other headphones and be like, okay, here's the 650 or something like that. Stuff that people, have as a reference point. But this is just sort of an agnostic reference point that's like, all right, we know that this is what a large percentage of people prefer. So relative to that, here's how X, Y, and Z measures. Doesn't mean that it needs to perfectly adhere to this in order to sound good. All right. So I think that's often what people miss when there's an analysis of a headphone's frequency response. I think there's also some portion of this that needs to be considered, in the sense that everything below 900 hertz is not being impacted by the ear, the way that the ear amplifies certain frequencies. Well, it's not those frequencies, it's the frequencies above that where the ear is amplifying them. So you need to have, at the very least, in order to get a good tuning, you need to have some kind of ear gain, and that is this rise here. So With this headphone, it doesn't really have much going on at all until you get to 6K. That's the only ear gain that it has is 6K. That's a problem. And because of that, this tuning is bad. Now, it doesn't need to perfectly match this level of ear gain or where exactly it is. If you look at like the Focal Clear, it's like a little boosted here at around 1.5K, which is, I mean, it's fine. It has the effect of pronouncing vocals for that headphone, but, you know, it doesn't, technically it deviates from the target here. So does the 650. All right. But those are both great sounding headphones because they have some level of ear gain, even though they don't perfectly match the target there. I think the 650 is actually even north of that. The Hi-Fi Aria is another good example of this. It has ear gain, but it has more ear gain than what the target asks for. But because it's balanced out with where, you know, the frequency response is, you know, various different ranges of the frequency response, the harmonics are balanced with one another. And that really is what we are looking for with tonal balance, and what a good, and as you put, you know, a complete tuning is. If it has good balance for fundamental and harmonic, then we don't need to worry about adherence to or deviation from this target curve, right? But the target curve will tell us what a known reference point is for good balance for fundamental and harmonic. So if it has this kind of shape to it, regardless of whether it's elevated or a little bit relaxed, you know, then as long as it has that kind of shape, then that's solid. But yeah, hope that clears that up. But as Oratory will tell you, yeah, you can achieve like whatever tuning you want with whatever technology you want. It's not limited by one technology or another. Sorry, what's Mad's experiment? I don't. This is no. I'll talk to you about that later. That's it's for something else. But we are working on an experiment, yeah, to try and help kind of figure out the subjective qualia, and you know. But yeah, I have some concerns about that, but we're going to try and do that this coming week. Does he have some? Yeah, as we're talking about the passive filters again. I got to catch up, guys. If I've missed your question, you know, feel free to ask it again. But I can't guarantee that I'm going to get to every single one here. If you do absolutely need it to be answered, that's what the super chat is for. But don't feel like you have to. I'll do my best. We're talking about coding now. Focal Clear MG versus Hi-Fi Aria versus Lcdx, or any other recommendations? I don't know. I wasn't that sold on the MG's tuning. I like the original Clear better. I'd say right now, all of those compete with one another. If you want punch, Focal Clear. If you want soundstage, Hi-Fi Aria. It's depth and space, Hi-Fi Aria. If you want a solid all-rounder, Lcdx would be my advice. But the Aria does have a sense of an improved sense of like distance between, you know, the images over the Lcdx. It's a more open sounding headphone as well, and that could also be a psychoacoustic effect of it being physically more open as well. But I actually do think that there's more depth with the Aria. For microdynamics, though, and micro detail, they're either on par or even a slight edge to the Lcdx. So that's interesting. And I have both of them here, so I am doing that side by side. But it's impressive with the Lcdx, like for the price. So you can't really go wrong with any of those, although, you know, in my opinion, I like the original Clear better. 007 Mark II 2.9, I don't know. Yeah, it's oddly tuned based on Cringe and Oratory scraps. I need to get one in. I can't. There are different versions and iterations that are, you know, different from what the measurements are out there. So I need to get one in to be able to be sure of that. Let's see. I have had Clear MG and Aria. I much prefer MG. Aria sounds dry and lean to me in the upper mids. Yeah, and the Clear MG is going to be a lot more thicker in the mids, like around 1.5K. But my issue with the Clear MG is that the mid treble focus is gone in favor of the upper treble shimmer, and to me that it gets it's not as well balanced. Again, we're talking about tonal balance. Well, that's another example where I don't think it's as well balanced. And the aria is more balanced there in the treble, even though it's brighter. Overall, the aria is brighter. And it's funny because like I've done this test with a number of people, like compared the original clear, even with the aria. Some people will say, "Wow, the clear is way more engaging," and they're keying in on the dynamic qualities there, the punch and slam and all that. Other people will be like, "Wow, the clear is nowhere near as spacious and the overall sense of detail and like the perceptive qualities that people enjoy, they'd end up keying more for the aria." So I don't think there's a clear answer. See what I did there? As to which is just better in a linear fashion, because I don't think it's possible to even like consider it like that. But I do think that depending on the qualities that you want, one would clearly be better than the other. So for me, it's also a tough choice, because there are some times when I'm looking for that spacious quality, that especially when listening to a lot of classical music, and that really does well with that stuff, the large sense of everything on the aria. But if I'm listening to something more upbeat, then the clear might be the way to go. Oh god, you guys are talking about coding and I want to die. Rad 0 versus Lcdx 2021. Tough question. I would go Rad 0 on that one. I think it's more detailed. But depends on the Rad 0. I heard one that wasn't, so. But two of the ones that I heard were definitely more detailed. Let's see. Yeah, the Lcdx and XC are the 2021 versions measure way better than the previous ones. And they're also lighter. So, yeah, it's a win. Still heavy, though. Like, they're still oddities, full-size oddities. I need to trademark tonal balance? I don't think that's possible. Oratory is such a valuable community member. Yeah, he definitely is. I do think, like, I don't know, the reason why I'm not an objectivist is because what I'm doing here is reporting my experience. I've talked about this multiple times, and so I'm sorry if this is like treading over ground that I've already tread over, but like what I'm doing is when I'm reviewing a headphone is I'm reporting my subjective experience. Yeah, I'm using the data here to, the measurements to, indicate or predict what this might sound like to somebody else, and anchor my subjective experiences to something more tangible in a visual way. And this is more, I think, way more useful than sound demos. But at the end of the day, I'm reporting something that is my perception, right? And that is a uniquely subjective thing. Resolve can trademark K-Hertz. No, man. Precogs all about K-Hertz these days. I suggested for the multi-kilobug flagships that the manufacturer provides a serial number specific EQ with each unit from the factory. So far it hasn't happened yet. Yeah. Turns out it's easier to market headphones when you don't do that. No, I won't be reviewing that Austrian audio thing. No. There's stuff where it's like it measures so badly that like when you look at it, you go, oh yeah, there's no way that's going to sound good. That seems to be one of them. And so I don't think there's a need to really review that. Maybe if they come up with another one that is a little bit more well tuned. Yeah. Because from my understanding, that was AKG, but I could be wrong about that. Do you reckon the size of the moving element of the driver has some correlation to the sense of positional accuracy specifically? No, I don't. I find smaller planars like the T50RP seem to have more obvious positional cues, like most dynamics compared with other planars. I think more than the size, I think it's the angle and positioning of the driver. I think that has a bigger influence. Now, it might be the case that in examples of really large diaphragm headphones, like the Hi-Fi Man ones they have the largest diaphragms out of any headphones. They're massive. Um, it could be the case that they are they're housed in such a way that it's closer to one position rather than another position. But I don't think necessarily the size is proportional to worse positional accuracy or better positional accuracy at all. It's probably an implementation thing rather than anything else. How's the ribbon gold planar so far? Meh. Middling. Better than the GL2000, but as far as tuning, but not a good tuning. And then also, like, I wouldn't recommend this without EQ, but way less offensive than the GL2000. But then also there's some blunting of the detail that's going on. The blunting of macro detail. Sorry, micro. Blunting of dynamics, of macro and micro dynamics going on in the bass and in the treble. So it sounds very compressed is the wrong word, but it sounds very like just like not engaging. What I like about it is the sense of stage and space is very interesting with this one. So for those qualities, I'm on board. Like, it's a very interesting presentation overall. Like, the separation is really cool. The incisiveness is really cool. And the mid-range detail is also pretty good here, better than that of the GL2000. But at $1,400 or however much this costs, I don't see why I would get this over an Lcdx for that, right? Yeah, I need to get those other pads for the pleather pads for the Odysseys. Because and Grover was telling me this as well. He likes it better with the pleather pads, but I hate I hate pads that have adhesives, and I know they're required, but like I don't want to take pads off and put pads on when they're adhesive based. So it's annoying to do. Mildly terrifying, to be honest. When you say K-Hertz, I have the urge to fight. I have to fight the urge to throw my phone. Just because VC is more expensive doesn't mean it's better. Aeolus is great. If you want to sit back and relax, VC is more engaging. Yeah, like price is it's not in a linear fashion doesn't scale in a linear fashion with performance. I think price sets necessary conditions for performance, but not sufficient ones. So what do I mean by that? I don't think you'd be able to release an LCD4 at $200, for example, or the level of technical performance of a Utopia, or even an LCDX at $300 or that kind of stuff. I don't think it's possible to do that. So in that sense, the price is a certain element of price to performance. There's a necessary condition on that. There's a requirement that it costs at least a certain amount for the materials, for the landed cost of the headphone, to be able to achieve a certain level of technical performance. But that doesn't mean that the tuning is going to be good, and in many cases it's not for higher end stuff. So it does not scale like, just because something costs a lot, it's not a sufficient condition for it being a good sounding headphone. Hello, Android. How's it going, man? I got to pick up your headphone from the post office. I was going to go do that, but then I'd finally set this up and was doing measurements with this. So I figured I'd just, move along. Kill all the cows. Leather pads for the win. As long as I get to eat the steaks. There will be an ant, and there was an ant. Yes. Did you get the HE6 SEV2 yet? Yeah, it's at the post office. Oh yeah, you would have heard that by now. Sorry, I'm catching up, guys. Catching up. When will you review the Felix Audio Euphoria, and which headphones will you pair with it? Well, I had the Echo here, but I had to take it back because I think it was either like an open box unit or it was damaged or something, so I couldn't really give that one a proper evaluation. But the Euphoria is at the office. I haven't spent any time with it. So I'll need to, yeah. It's tough to move that stuff back and forth, so maybe I'll put it into the studio and spend some time with it there. What are the differences between high and low current modes on the IHA6? This is the best amp for planars under 1K. Could be. I don't think you need the IHA6 for 99% of headphones. It's only really like the HE6 and Susvara and LCD4 that the IHA6 is, going to be the one to go for there. I also like there are better amplifiers. Under 1K though, tough. And the difference between the current modes, so there is a theory that inefficient planars require or benefit from high current. Now, in my experience, high current mode did better for certain things like the Head Audio headphone. That's another one, by the way. And it did do better for other, like Hyphen and Susvara as well. So there might be something to that. But I only have a subjective take there. Had the clear MG been burned in before the review, I found Focal headphones sound quite better after burn-in. Out of the box, the tonality of the MG is quite off. Do you mean brain burn-in? Or do you mean... Because, okay, so when it comes to burn-in, there is... I talked to a number of people about this who actually make transducers. And the answer was that burn-in can potentially be a thing that that happens within the initial like couple of minutes, but spending hours on it there's no point of doing that. But the other thing is that those initial couple of minutes are usually taken care of by the channel matching process that goes on, the driver matching process that goes on in QC anyways. So you probably won't, in most cases, hear a difference with burn-in. But I think in cases where people are reporting burn-in and differences, and they're hedging against the brain burn-in effect, which I think is real in some cases, but in other cases, like you can actively hedge against that, especially if you're trying tons of different headphones. In most cases, burn-in is actually just pads conforming to your head better. I think that's really all that's going on there. And as the pads conform to your head, the tonality is going to change, especially with those the Clear and the Clear MG and those ones where they have the spring-loaded cups. So I think that's really what's going on there for you. Because no, they do not change after burn-in. And as an example, every headphone that I review, it's at least 2 weeks of actual use. So, and measuring afterwards as well. Like I'll measure it, a number of times with different conditions so like I'll do on-head measurements to see where the bass level is, for example, or try and get an air gap behavior and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's not something that's changed. And actually, in the case of the Clear MG, because I found some weird results there compared to the original Clear, which I showed in the video on the bass level, I actually spent a long time talking to Jude about that because our measurements for the Clear MG did agree, but the difference between the Clear MG and the Clear did not. So that we were trying to figure out what was going on with that, and it turns out that I think the original Clear that I had just measured it wasn't necessarily representative in the bass. But because of that, I spent way more time measuring the Clear MG, and it's pad swapping and everything else. So I'm very confident about my Clear MG measurements at this point. Same reason why we roll ZMF pads so much. The material absolutely makes a difference. It absolutely does. And also for perceived sense of detail as well. Um, see, it's situations like that where the statements like detail, what we're calling here detail, is potentially captured by frequency response, makes so much sense, because those little changes that show up in frequency response can absolutely be the result, be responsible for perceived detail differences in when we're swapping pads. So I think it's absolutely possible. I don't know what you mean by Ultra Instinct version of the DT150s. Sorry. Excuse me. These terms are used in different contexts, and things like micro and macro aren't mentioned in the glossary at all, rendering them incredibly unclear descriptors. So the problem, yeah, it's a big problem. Like, we have so many different terms and people use them in different ways, but I think among people who are very experienced in this stuff with a wide range of stuff, they tend to gravitate towards using the same descriptors. So if you're uninitiated with that, micro detail, microdynamics have been described as small gradations of volume. This is like a SBAF term as well. They went through a huge list, but small gradations of volume, and I've co-opted that term because I think there is something to that. And to me, I hear that as the clarity for trailing ends of tones for things. And when you have when you have two headphones that do this in such a different way, for example, the Drop Panda is one of the worst headphones I've ever heard for this quality. It completely lops off the trailing ends of tones, completely blunting the sense of microdynamics and micro detail. And you compare that to something like an Lcdx, or honestly a Focal Clear. I pick an Lcdx because it's a planar, where the trailing ends of tones are very clear. Your microdynamic and micro detail ability are very good. These differences start to be more recognizable in other evaluations of headphones. And that's why I say with this Gold Planar GL1200, what I'm hearing here as the limit on detail is in that small clarity for for trailing ends of tones, meaning that the small gradations of volume are not as, you're not getting as many shades in the gradient, essentially. And I mean, I think that's a very straightforward descriptor, one that I think other people have other reviewers, for example, are picking up on as well. Kryn, for example, he notices this quality as well, as does Max Settings, as does a lot of other people who are, I guess, like they're very discerning. They're spending a lot of time with the equipment, and they have also a large breadth of experience with a wide range of equipment. And also, of course, folks, a lot of the SBAFers as well, and folks on forums, when they start gravitating towards these terms, it's not because they're grasping at straws, or they're just creating metaphors. There really is a tangible thing there. Now, we could call it whatever we want. It's just that that's what happens to be the, I guess, community-oriented agreed upon term. And when I say agreed upon, it's really not a huge, it's not like a wide consensus, unfortunately. So that's really the problem, is that the consensus isn't there. And so maybe a few of us are using these terms, but they're really at a certain point where we're describing subjective experiences, you have to anchor your descriptions to metaphors in some way. So I made a comment about this before, and somebody was critical of it. I made a comment on Reddit that, like, all of what we're talking about here as detail and microdynamics, whatever else, these are all just acoustic properties that we subjectively describe like this. So in theory, these qualities like micro detail and trailing ends of tones and small gradations of volume and all that stuff, that is in theory all measurable stuff. We're just not doing a very good job of anchoring those descriptors to data. This is what I would like to see, an actual scientific approach to this stuff look into. It's what I would want to look into. It's way more interesting. I burn in headphones in the microwave oven. Oh my god. Uh, but yeah, also, I mean, it's tough because of the psychoacoustic effects that show up as well, and this is why sometimes you'll see a lot of madness in forum threads where people are, there's purchase justification going on, or they don't have a wide range of experience with a wide range of equipment, and so it's the first thing that the first good detailed headphone that they heard, and so they're over-representing how good something is, or I mean, usually it's some combination of that. And it's tough when those framing effects are impacting and coloring people's opinions, and they're reporting this and expressing it, and then other people buy stuff based on those opinions, and then you get this sort of inertia of madness. Which is not easy to cut through, but that's kind of what my project is trying to do here, and I guess not just me, but like that's basically what the headphones.com project is, with all the content creators that we have on the channel, and what we're all trying to do is kind of create this more, let's say, sober take on stuff, regardless of whether or not you agree. Like, we're trying to not be as influenced by these psychoacoustic effects, or purchase justification, or which by all accounts still are there. I mean, everybody has biases, so we just we can only really do our best to hedge against them. But thankfully, in our case, like with Precog and with Chrono and some of the other writers as well, Senior C, actually, I don't know if you guys know him. He does ACO reviews. He might be here. I think it's a Spanish language. He does a lot of Spanish language reviews, but he's been doing a ton of articles and stuff like that as well on the forum, and I think it's worth reading that stuff as well, because if you're not buying something, you don't have to worry about purchase justification, and if you're not benefiting monetarily from something, you have no extra incentive to say that it's good. So I think it's tough. It's a tough line to walk, but like, in every case, the individual can actively hedge against biases, and it's up to the person to do that, and it's up to the community to recognize when there are breaches of that, and you might see a trend emerge in some cases, which I think does exist. All right, I'll go for another 5 minutes here. Best way to find out is to talk to people who run hi-fi stores. They know a thing or two about reliability. That is true. They would know about the failure rates. Be interesting. I haven't looked into that, but yeah. By the way, just so, like, if anybody doesn't know, I am not, like, my name is Andrew, but I'm not the Andrew who is the CEO of headphones.com. Like, I work for headphones.com. I'm not the CEO. We are two different people. Yeah, that's people often mistake that. This community was the first time I ever heard macrodynamics in the context of bass impact. Yeah. This is something that, like, conversations with a lot of other folks has kind of like put me onto, and in the sense of, like, I didn't care about it that much before, but I definitely care about it now. And the most illuminating examples of this are, again, when you have these strong contrasts, like comparing an HE6 to a DCA headphone, or a Focal Clear or Focal Utopia against an Ananda, right? Like that's where these differences are so dramatic, and they don't seem to correlate with measured bass response. So there's no, like, we're doing our best to figure out what actually is responsible for this subjective quality that is almost not universally, but very strongly agreed upon by many community people, many core community people and reviewers, and a lot of people have the same impressions about these headphones. The Ananda is a little limp in the bass. It's not particularly punchy. it's detailed. It's got good soundstage, but it's not particularly punchy. Great tuning, one of the best tunings, but compared to a Focal Clear, which has arguably a worse tuning and lower sub bass, it's nowhere near as or the Clear is way more punchy than the Ananda. So there's so many counterexamples to this. Best sax under 1K. I can't help you there. DAX under 1K. SMSL SU9 is solid. LAQXD1 is solid. Micro details just like detail, but smaller. Yeah, it's just itty bitty. I've been sort of conflating microdynamics and micro detail. I know they broke it out into different things back in that SBAF thread. I used to be an SBAFer. No shame in saying that. But yeah, I've sort of been, I've been combining those concepts because you could parse this stuff in like 50 million different ways, and I'm trying to make things a little bit more concise for the experience, and so that's why I do that. But think of it like this: macrodynamics is for big sounds, microdynamics is for small sounds. If that weren't obvious. There's always the face of the headphone show already. Well, we have a number of other reviewers on the channel as well, though. This channel is a platform for reviewers who are trying to do this thing that we're trying to do, which is, again, that sober take that's not influenced by, purchase justification or, overhyping things or flavor of the month stuff. We don't use affiliate links, and we don't like. If we don't like something, we say it. Like we're not afraid to say that we don't like things. And so that's kind of, what this is all about. It just, conveniently, we all happen to like headphones, right? So I think there's some people out there who try to make a name for themselves by being deliberately critical of literally everything. And then that is exciting for people, because they're like, wow, this guy's not afraid to say that this thing sucks. When in reality, it's just because they're trying to, get that shock value, I guess. But and so we're not out there deliberately to try and say how bad certain headphones are. It's more just trying to give honest, truthful takes. That's really what we're trying to do here. Alex, thank you. What are your impressions of the Meze Empyrean? I hear they are overpriced. Yeah, that's a good. They're overpriced for sound quality, but appropriately priced for headphones shouldn't cost $3,000 or $3,500. That's crazy. But it has ridiculously good build quality and ridiculously good comfort. But for sound quality, the sound quality there is much closer to like $1,000 for like detail and stuff like that. The tuning doesn't suck, actually. Like it's a bit spicy in the upper treble and it's a bit bloated in the bass, but the rest of the tuning there is nice, especially for the like way that it represents the upper mids. It's like it very closely follows the target, but like a little relaxed, so solid. Best Odyssey under 100. I sure hope the XC isn't just a cup cover. That sounds awful. Put your hands over the cup opening. So I've taken an XC. I've taken the cups off of an XC, and the inside looks very similar to when you take the grill off of an X. But the problem is you can't. Like, I don't recommend taking the grills off your Odyssey headphones or the cups off of your closed-back Odysseys, because the tuning for bass level is dependent on how tight the screws are. And if you don't have the same torque value for all the screws that is what they are saying or what they have by default, then you're going to screw it up. Same with the grills for the open backs. So you don't want to do that. And so no, they're not exactly the same, because one has a foam bit and then a grill pattern and then the piece that goes on, and the other has a foam bit and then just the cup piece. So there are differences there. What I'm not aware of is if there's any difference to analog filters or anything like that they put in there. between the two and the magnetic circuits and all that stuff. But visually, they look very similar when you take the backs off. And interestingly, there's a guy who sent me these, which are like they have a whole bunch of foam on the inside, and basically it's just damping material. And then these are supposed to fit with the Odyssey open backs to make them close back. And there were interesting results. I think the tuning needs work on that, but it's tough because you don't know, like it'll all depend on which version of the Odyssey you have, because he might tune it for one, but then there are so many different revisions that you wouldn't know if it would work necessarily for everything. Soundwave, thanks. Best headphones for ASMR and binaural. Best? Susvara. Rob, you gotta oh wait, okay, I see your comment now. If you were going to Pluto, would you take the Stellia or the Verite closed? Probably Verite closed. To Pluto. Are you going to review the audio output from the Asus ROG Phone 5? No, I don't know why I would do that. Actually, I still have a V30 here. LG V30. I know they're out of the phone business now, which is a shame for a lot of audio people because they have built-in headphone amplifiers in them, which was great. So I still have my V30, which the reason why I still have it is because it's potentially useful to test portable, like a lot of IEMs with, like, now, I have other devices like DAPs and stuff, but like there's a lot of people who just have a phone, and I need a phone that has a output, and I don't want to use a dongle. So that's kind of the benefit of that. But it also has it's got a DAC in it, ESS based DAC in it. I mean, I guess technically any phone with an output like audio or a 3.5 output would have a DAC in it, but that one's got a good one. Sorry, what are you guys coughing about? Glad you are not all about measurements. ASMR? Do you mean ASR? I don't know what you're talking about with DMS. Golden Sound stuff's interesting, yeah. Yeah, I liked his thing on the MQA. DMS's stuff's gotten really good. I like his recent takes a lot. Yeah. I mean, there's stuff I disagree with him about for sure, but I like the way that he approaches it. Same with Kren, These are trustworthy people. They're not trying to deliberately overhype stuff. They're being honest. Where is... I feel like I'm missing a comment here. Trying to make sure I catch everything. No Theme loves metal. Yeah. Boy, does he ever. Enough that he makes multiple videos on you. Oh, God. Have you got a video coming for the Gold Planer GL 1200? Yeah, I'll do a video on it. Normally I try to do at least I'm moving forward. I'm trying to do it like this, where I do first impressions videos, and then a week later or 2 weeks later do a full review, because it takes time to review stuff, and the more time we have with it, the better. At least it takes time to be right. It takes time to be confident. And not saying I've been right all the time. I've definitely been wrong about stuff, but you learn as the more you do, and the more you compare, the more you learn about stuff, right? So that's why it takes time to do reviews. But this is going to serve sort of like as a first impressions, instead of doing a video on this one. But I will do a review of it, yeah. And I also have that Timsock planar as well, which is interesting. But like the Timsock's, it's got better technical performance than this. But the tuning is also pretty weird, and also I like the physical construction; it's pretty comfy as well. But man, the pads on it are super janky. I've heard mixed things about the earphone thing, but my name is on the list to. Well, we bought one, so I want to hear it because I've got like 6 different true wireless IEMs from the top ones from Amazon. So I'm going to be doing a video covering all of those, but I also want to include the earphone in that because all of them that I've tried so far have been terrible. So I'm hopeful that the earphone is actually good because that would be I don't want to just do a video where I'm just like, yeah, everything sucks. A comparison video where it can't be just everything sucks, even though so far all the ones I've tested have been really bad. So I'm hopeful that the earphone thing is actually good. Do you describe, Alex? Thanks. Do you subscribe to paying $1,000 and above for headphone cables? No. I don't think I would pay $200 for a headphone cable for the ergonomics and use and aesthetics totally. But no, it's like here's the thing with the psychoacoustic effects that might be imparted by purchase justification. If $1,000 cables make you pay attention better to the music that you're listening to, then who's to say that you're not actually hearing things that you wouldn't hear if you didn't have those $1,000 cables? But acoustically, no. Are you planning to take a look at the SMSL SU8? I did a review of the SU9. So no, I won't review the SU8. Why would you get the SU9? It's awesome. Do you have the Matrix X Saber Pro? That's the DAC I'm using right now. Yeah, it's I don't own it, but it's the DAC that I'm using right now. Do you have any plans to measure FR in 3 dimensions, including the decay time in the future? Metal, go. We have to explain that CSD is not necessarily representative of what people think it's representative of when looking at it. I don't have any plans to show waterfall graphs and CSD and stuff like that because in headphones, which are generally minimum phase devices, time domain information is proportional to frequency response information, which means that if you fix the whatever is showing up there in frequency response, it'll fix that resonance in time domain. It gets weird because there are enough counterexamples in planar magnetic headphones in particular that might show the contrary of this, but I think in reality that stuff is not audible, and at the very least it's not an indicator of. It looks like it indicates cleanliness and detail, but I really strongly don't think that's the case. I don't think it actually indicates anything that isn't also indicated by frequency response to a certain extent, because there are going to be some examples where headphones are not perfectly minimum phase devices. I think that's probably what's going on there. But again, I can't prove it. So I would just point to what Floyd Toole has said on the subject and what a number of other people who listen to what Chocomel has said on the subject. All right, guys, 2 more questions. Unless you own a Hi-Fi Man, you're better off with stock cable. Yeah, the Hi-Fi Man cables are not good. Odyssey cables are great. What's your favorite top-of-the-line headphones paired with a tube amp? I didn't do this, but I should have, and I probably will in the future. But I would be really curious how a Focal Utopia would sound off of an Amps and Sound Kenzie or Mogwai. The Mogwai would be interesting because of the lower output impedance there, but and because also the Focal headphones, they bass boost when you run it off of higher output impedance. So even off of the 32 ohm output impedance of the Kenzie, it'd be really curious how that would affect the Utopia. I think high impedance, and with that said, high impedance dynamic driver headphones and tube amps, that's a good combo. Like high-end tube amps though. Like I wouldn't buy a low-end tube amp or a mid-range tube amp. Without weight in the equation, Lcdx or headphone, I would go headphone. That is that really interesting physicality for everything that I really enjoy. What's the most overrated headphone brand? Brand? Tough. What do you mean by brand though? Do you mean like if they have bad build quality, it's Hi-Fi Man, right? If they have bad sound, like a lot of Hi-Fi Man stuff's tuned really well though, so you know, and they have they're good for the price. Um, Overrated, probably Apple or um, I would say Audio Technica because of the N50X, but the ADX 5000 was pretty interesting, and they got a lot of other stuff that's interesting as well. Like the R70X is pretty interesting too. So yeah, I can't. It's not fair to say Audio Technica either. If you're talking like very, uh, yeah, probably Stacks then. Like in the headphone enthusiast world, Stacks probably, but that's only like, yeah, I need to get more of that stuff in. One more. I want to find a good one. If you play 100 hertz wave and a 10k hertz wave, there it is for you, Metal. 10k hertz. Uh, at the same time, do headphones match their frequency at a time response? I have matched their one frequency at a time response. No idea what you mean there. If you play, are you talking about like the time domain response, like or impulse response or something like that, and whether that they should match? I am not totally sure what you mean by that. Um, Amir can be too measurement dependent. Also has bad ears. I do worry that he's maybe damaged his hearing with how loud he listens. But I can't. I think here's the thing, right? I'll end on this point. Um, people there's a risk that there's a risk that when you're indexing too hard for measurable things, that's all you're picking up on. That's all you're keying in on. I think Sean Olive is like this. I think Amir is like this. I think for all the stuff that many people, many reviewers like myself or Kryn or Max or honestly Metal are picking up on, I think they're just not discerning those qualities like detail and stuff like that because they're only listening for tonal balance for what they can measure. And I think this has a confirmation bias effect the same way that many other framing effects show up, where the only thing that you're listening for happens to be the thing that you can measure, or at least that happens to be the thing that you can. That's because I can't say it like that because technically you could capture all kinds of stuff with the measurement, but that's the thing that we are analyzing our frequency response in terms of. So yeah, that's why I think it's tough to base your conclusions solely on a measured result, right? If you are just indexing super hard for that measurement, that's where I'll leave it, because again, I don't think that what Amir's doing as far as the measurement stuff is false. Data is data. It's that he's just getting started with headphone measurements, and there are question marks about his methodology and what the best practices are for this that he's not observing, that everybody else has sort of noticed here. And I think that's really one of the reasons why you see, like these days, you see a ASR post or something from ASR get posted on Reddit, and people aren't taking it seriously anymore, which I think is like, it's nice to see that there's some sense there still. Now, inevitably, in every thread, you get what I'm going to call here, it's audio simping, because there are a lot of people who don't understand how the measurements are conducted or how they should be conducted, who think that just because one person has done, because one person has been prominent in a field for a while, that they're necessarily doing it better than everybody else, and that everybody else is wrong. Without actually, a lot of these people who are claiming this stuff, they don't actually know how to do this stuff themselves, and they don't know they're not even sure how to read this stuff. So they're just basing it off of the, you know, authoritative speak from one source. And to me, it's like, you know, they'll try and I've seen this happen. It's happened to me. They'll try and denigrate the, you know, the testing that you've done, the data that you're representing, because it's not from that source, even though it might show the same thing. So, and that's the other thing, is like, for many of his measurements, much of what he shows is the same as what I've found. So, you know, I'm not going to be critical of that. I'm going to be critical of, you know, some of the interpretation. I think it's just not rigorous enough. I think he just hasn't bothered to take the time to properly figure out where these qualities are coming from, and just saying, well, here's what the measurement shows, therefore, you know, here's my conclusion. And I don't think it's that simple. Audio simping. Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'm gonna call it there, guys. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. If I'm not mistaken, I think Marcello is streaming now, and he's into some more of the high-end stuff as well. So if you guys are interested in that stuff, definitely go and check out Marcello. I'll try and get his channel going here. I'll find a link to it. Yeah, he is. Okay.
For instance, this I had to.
Yeah. He's doing the Felix Audio Echo Mark II OTL tube amplifier. So check that out here. Again, that was the one that I think I had that was defective. So hopefully he's got a working one. All right, guys, take it easy. I'll see you guys in the next one. Audio Echo Mark II OTL tube amplifier. So check that out.